Hey guys, welcome back to Mimir. Today I'm sitting down with Danielle Brooks, the founder of Honey Truck, a boutique honey brand. Danielle and I actually met through a podcast matching platform, and in her pitch to me, she told me that Honey Truck was built in the margins of her life. She didn't have the luxury of building fast, so she had to learn how to build intentionally. And it felt like she was speaking directly to me. I mean, she was, but more specifically, she was speaking to a circumstance I am all too familiar with. I am also building in the margins of my life, constantly hunting for the path through the trees that gets me out and into the horizon of the future I want. I learned a lot from Danielle, but the lesson that leapt out to me was how she didn't manufacture a differentiator. She paid close attention to what was already special about her product instead of searching the competition for where she fits in. She noticed her honeys looked different, tasted different depending on where her bees lived, and she built her entire brand around that. As a marketer, that's what I'm looking for. Not something engineered, and as founders, that's a lesson you need to pay attention to. We also get into the mechanics of building a product-based business, from wholesale pricing to the question I think any founder will ask themselves, which is, do I have a business or do I have an expensive hobby? And Danielle shares a version of work-life balance that's the opposite of hustle culture. It's just about doing the next right thing, even when it's painfully slow, even when the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels impossible to close. Honestly, that's the version of entrepreneurship that I designed this podcast to tell. If your scrappy beginning has you wondering whether you're doing it right, then this episode is exactly what you need to hear today. Danielle, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Maddie. I'm so excited to be here.
I don't know if you've ever heard of the show called Clarkson's Farm. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, I love Clarkson's Farm.
Okay, me too. I'm a huge fan. My fiance and I are obsessed with it. And so that was actually one of the first times I ever really understood or, learned a little bit more about beekeeping, and watching Jeremy do the thing where he spins the honeycombs around and he just totally destroyed all of them.
Yes, you can do that if you don't have a plasticell foundation, or depending on which ways you're slinging them, you can get into trouble. My husband and I like to joke that Jeremy and his the guy who oversees everything and questions him about his choices, it's almost a verbatim conversations that my husband and I have, and that I'm Jeremy and he's like, but Danielle, how will this make you money? And I'm like, it's a great idea. How can it not make me money? And he's like, but you have to have actual business plans and numbers and models and justify the cost that you're about to spend. And I'm just like, but this is fun. Let's just do it.
He's your real life Charlie.
Yes, he is. He is for sure.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm really glad that we connect on that too, because I don't have a lot of people that I can talk to about Clarkson's Farm because it's so niche. But can you tell me how you got into beekeeping?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a full-time family photographer, just doing family photo sessions, high school seniors, and I was enjoying what I was doing. One day, honestly, I just had an idea and was like, I want to get a beehive. It very much was out of left field. I do feel like it's an idea that God planted in my heart to just do, because my husband accurately was like, Danielle, you don't like insects. What makes you think this is a good choice? And I was like, I don't know. This is just, Jeremy and Charlie were just, and he said, well, maybe you should find somebody who has bees before you just bring home, 40 to 60,000 stinging insects to make sure that you're going to enjoy this. And so I went to our local bee club here in St. Augustine and met somebody who had bees. They let me come and see their hive. And even I remember being in the hive for the first time, and it was like an electric energy of I am terrified at what is happening, but also I can't look away. This is what I'm here to do. And I want to learn more. And so I told him, I was like, yeah, I was afraid, but this is a fear that I know I can overcome. And I know that this is something that I want to pursue. So I just got one beehive and it just spiraled out of control from there. You typically make more bees when you have honeybees. And so we ended up having more bees than were necessary on our property. And so we found somebody else who lived a little bit further away from us in St. Augustine. We have Anastasia Island. So they lived on the island and we put bees on their property. And then when I harvested the honeys in the springtime, they looked different. They were different colors, they tasted differently. And immediately it was like a lightning bolt of, this is my golden egg. This is what I want to do and what I want to pursue. This is a marketable quality and a trait. And so I just started selling at local farmers markets. I decided that I wanted to sell it out of a cool antique vehicle, because why not? Why have an ordinary farmer's market table when you could sell it out of a really cool truck? And my husband, who loves vehicles, did not disagree with me. Later, he told me, in case if it failed miserably, at least we got a really cool truck out of the deal. But we now have two antique vehicles that we have. They are a Ford Econoline, 1962 and a 1963. And if you've ever seen a Ford Econoline, it's very unique. It is I like to say it's the ugly stepchild of the Ford company. They didn't make them for very long. They are kind of unique to find, and they just go so well with beekeeping.
I am going to tell my fiance about that when we get home, because he's a car guy and he loves a good old truck. I think that's like actually his dream car. So I'm going to write down exactly what you told me, and then I'm going to tell him about it later, and he's probably going to be like, oh my God, that's so cool. He's going to be really
It is a little scary to drive. There's no airbags. It's not equipped with a horn. We had to install seatbelts in it. When you look at the vehicle, I can show you a quick photo. It's an advertisement.
Oh my gosh.
If you notice the cab of the vehicle, you are sitting directly on the wheels, and the engine for the vehicle is in between you and the passenger. It only holds two people, three if you put one on the engine tank there. But yeah, so she's, look at it. It's a weird looking truck, and
That's
beekeeping
so
is weird, so it just works. I love it.
And I really liked the metaphor that I don't know if you were intentionally making, but in my mind it connected immediately to the experience of when you start a business in beekeeping. Like, it's this super exciting, electrifying moment in time where you have all these like creative juices, and life feels like it's so full of possibilities, and yet simultaneously it's so terrifying because it is an investment that could or could not pay off, and there's so many question marks. So it's like simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying all at the same time.
Absolutely. And I would argue that I still don't know if this idea is going to pay off, so to speak. Even if it does fail miserably and I close up shop and nothing ever happens and you never hear about the honey truck again, I have learned so much personally in how to interact with people in a business way. I now know how to source products. I know how to work with manufacturers. I know how to work with distributors. I know how to work with, run the whole gamut of food and beverage and retail and that sort of thing. And so I would be able to work for another company and do exactly what I'm doing now, and already have those connections because I've been working with these people in the industry. So even if it fails, meaning the definition of failure for me is not selling my company. Like, that is my end goal. That's why I got into doing this for Honey Truck. One day I want to be able to sell it as a business, brand for somebody's portfolio. I want it to be a boutique food brand. But if that's not the end goal, if that's not what happens, I don't even know that I would say that was a failure, because it made me into who I am now. And it gave me all of these cool skills that I wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yeah. I mean, you are growing a company, but I feel like you're also growing yourself at the same time. Like,
Right.
you know that come what may, you're going to be able to pick yourself up and figure something else out and take all of that experience and do whatever you can, like, even better than the last time that you started.
Absolutely. And I mean, the goal could change, like my kids, I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. Roll the calendar forward 20 years, and maybe one of them is like, Mom, I want to work at Honey Truck. I want to do this thing. I want to grow it. And suddenly I'm not selling it. My children are inheriting a business and they are making it something bigger than I could have even imagined. So who knows what that looks like.
And I think that's really cool. I feel very similar, where you have an idea of what you want to happen or where you want the business to go, but we can't predict the future. And so I think some of it is allowing the cards to unfold in the way that they're meant to, but it's not a blindfold. It's more like you work every day on the mission and you build it in the way that feels right. It's like you just make the right next step every single day, and the path will show itself when it's ready.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to go back a little bit when you discovered that the honey was different, like geographically. And I think about this in terms of like wine, they call
Mhm.
it the like terroir or however you pronounce that in French. But I think it's something cool because I didn't know that that was a thing for honey. I don't know if it's called the same thing. But what I want to call to action for like the early stage founders who are listening is that this is for you like a masterclass in paying attention to what is already unique about your product instead of like having to manufacture something. And this is always what I'm looking for as a marketer, right? Like I don't ever want to sell snake oil. I want to understand what is really unique about the product that we're selling, and then we're just going to go in from that. And I think a lot of founders have like a golden ticket already sitting there, but don't necessarily recognize when it happens. So when you saw the differentiation, like what made you dig into that more and be like, wait, what is going on here? Like, how did you know that that's what you were going to market as this luxury item?
So Honey Truck started small. We say, hyper local honeys from St. Augustine, Florida. And now that I ship all over the United States, it's not that we're hyper local from St. Augustine. To me, I wanted to sell honey, where people lived. I didn't have land. I could only have a certain number of hives on at my house. And so I started doing a host a hive program where people would let me keep bees on their property. And because we live in a small town, you really can only put 2 or 3 beehives on one person's property because
Mm-hmm.
houses are so close. And you had to be careful with like pesticides and what does that look like. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I would harvest the honey and then I would generally keep them in the same areas so that my labels would be the same. We have Anastasia Island, the Shores, State Road 16, Elkton, and I just knew like people loved that it had their neighborhood on it. And then as as word kind of got out and Honey Truck became more popular, I had a local coffee shop that came to me and they said, "Hey, we want to wholesale your product." And I was like, okay, like they definitely were the big fish in the pond. I was like a no-name brand. And it was just kind of like, yeah, I just didn't think it was genuine. And bless her name was Brittany. She came back again to the farmer's market and she was like, "No, seriously, we really want to carry your products. Let us know what this would look like." So I started researching it because I knew I couldn't just sell them stuff. Like there had to be legalities around that. And there are. In Florida, when you sell direct to consumer, you can do it as a cottage food where your label just says it's made in my house, basically.
Okay.
And then as soon as you sell it over somebody else's counter, like I'm selling it to a coffee shop and then the coffee shop is selling it to you, it has to be bottled in a food grade kitchen. It's subject to inspections and they hold certain licenses and that sort of thing. I obviously didn't have any of that, nor did I have the money to be able to build it. So in Florida, they have I call it a loophole, but you can apply for a commissary letter of agreement, which says if you have a business, in my case, it was a bakery. They were closed on Sundays and Mondays, and they allowed me to come into their kitchen to bottle honey. And so what that says is this company holds all of the licenses that I need, and I'm standing underneath their umbrella, and I get the benefit of that, which was a perfect opportunity at the time when I didn't have the funds or the resources to be able to do that. And so that was kind of how I started wholesaling. And then the hyper local became less important over time because the coffee shop didn't necessarily care that it was coming from a specific community. They were like, "Hey, do like this is all St. Augustine honey?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course it comes from St. Augustine, but it's like a specific community." And so I just kind of realized that there was a little like gap in understanding there. And so I just created a St. Augustine label, which everybody knew where St. Augustine was. And so I started having that honey there. And then, over time, you get out of St. Augustine and no one really cares that their honey comes from St. Augustine. And so we created the Florida honey label, which allows us to, put any honey that was produced in the state of Florida in that labeled jar. We do still keep our hyper locals, and we still keep our St. Augustine honey. And I'm very stringent on where those locations are, because I hinge Honey Truck on being honest and transparent about where our honey comes from. That's important to the mission of Honey Truck, is educating clients on where their food comes from. If I didn't produce the honey, I know the beekeeper who did produce it. I still keep bees, but I don't keep enough hives in order to keep up with the demand that Honey Truck has. So I have a co-op situation where I work with other beekeepers, and I'm able to use their honey. Some of them have contracts for pollination on orange orchards, and that's how I'm able to get my orange blossom honey. And it's worked out really well over the years.
It's really interesting because what I'm hearing is like this great it takes a village mentality where you're leaning on the existing infrastructures within your community to help you grow. And I think that's an important takeaway because the early stage founder experience can be so isolating and lonely. And you're trying to do all of this Googling now. And now I think with AI too, like everyone's doing deep research by themselves and trying to figure out how to bring their product to life. And, in any other industry, you go probably like straight to the supplier, you go straight to the manufacturer. And I think I want to also challenge people listening to think about what infrastructure exists in their local community already that they can go and rely on in those early stages of growth, so you can figure out all the things that you're talking about, like as you're growing, and then going outside of the US, like how do you keep Honey Truck as the main focus for the brand, not just like where it's produced, because I think to your point, as you start to scale and grow, the like hyper local was starting to resonate less and less. And so then it's like, how do you rethink and put Honey Truck at the front of that and the mission at the front of that and allow your brand to grow without stifling it?
Yeah. And I think, it's important again to our identity as Honey Truck is I will never source honey outside the United States. So I may source honey outside the state of Florida. I don't currently. But, as I'm not ignorant, and my business will grow, and at some point I will need to be able to have more access to honey. But that's important to our brand in supporting American beekeeping. And so that may mean that I limit myself in terms of sales. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with saying, hey, I can't supply you right now. I have a phrase that I say often is don't ask, don't get. And, just by simply asking people in your community for help or their opinion or their thought on something is a great way to, one, get help because you probably need it. And two, you can learn from other people in the mistakes that they've made. I'm smart enough to realize I'm not the smartest person in the room. And so it's been rewarding to be able to listen to other people who are willing to give advice. And just for me personally, like I don't really look at other honey companies as competition. I think that we can get very narrow-minded and say like, oh, well, everybody is my competition. But the reality is there are very few honey companies that are directly marketing to my target audience. Yeah. And that means you're not my competition. Like your audience is somebody else, which means your wholesale accounts are going to be in different stores than mine are. And I don't need to compete with you for that. Nobody else is going to be Danielle Brooks running the Honey Truck company. Like that's me and me alone.
Yeah. And this is something that we talked a little bit off air as well, where, and even you said it now, like you would hold the sales back if it made sense at the time, but you also are like very specifically, you're not for everybody. And I think when you talk about how do you build like a luxury item in this way, how do you think about this as like a really boutique situation? How was that being built from the ground up with that in mind? Because it's not something that you can just like flip a switch one day and decide that you're going for a totally different target audience. I'm sure you made a lot of decisions early on that supported that idea.
Yeah. So when I first started out, I would say within the first year, I was just jarring honey in mason jars. I went to Target, I bought a case of jars, threw the honey in it, and called it a day. I eventually partnered with a good friend who I went to church with at the time, and she is a graphic designer. And I said, I knew enough about graphic design to understand I didn't need a logo. I needed a brand, and the two are different. A logo is just, it says your business name and that's it. A brand is everything from the colors, the font, the text, the style, everything is a brand. It's your identity. And so we swapped services. I did several family photo sessions for her, and she created the Honey Truck brand. And that was really kind of the birth of our identity in our target audience. I didn't really understand any of that at the time. I took a very helpful class that broke down how to identify your target audience. And it was, at that time I maybe had like a year's worth of sales. And so I was able to go back through that data and say, okay, who were my top spenders? Who were my repeat clients? And reach out to at least 20 of those people on that list and say, hey, can I give you a free jar of honey to answer some questions about you specifically? And so I would ask them what their age was, what their gender was, where they shop for their groceries, where do they get their news, what types of social media are they using, what companies do they see my brand identifying themselves with, what words would they use to describe my brand, just anything and everything that has to do with it. And honestly, that at that moment, I was like, oh, okay, so my target audience is a woman who is in her late 30s. She has expendable income. She likely has children. She cares about the food that she puts into her body. She reads things like Food and Wine, Southern Living, Garden and Gun. She's on Facebook and Instagram. She sees my brand identifying with Williams Sonoma, other high-end boutiques. And so that really for me was eye-opening and saying, okay, well, I don't need to market my honey to Possum's Pantry because my target audience is not shopping at Possum's Pantry. They're shopping at Williams Sonoma. There's a difference. And there's, again, I say that jokingly. There is no, I don't know of a Possum's Pantry, but, and there's nothing wrong. If you sell your honey at a flea market, good for you. You're selling honey, you're making money. That's great. That just means that you're not selling to my target audience, and that's okay. We're selling to different people.
I think that's such a great tip. Like hearing you say that, I've never heard it put in that way where it's so concrete. I think that's such like an easy way for anybody listening to look back and draw some of those important conclusions, because once you're clear on that, it allows you to really like run a lot faster and narrow your focus, so you're not just focusing on how are we gonna break even this month, but you're more like how are we gonna get to where we need to go and with our target audience. I think it's just much more of a strategic play rather than like the early stage floundering just for like whatever sales you'll take,
Yeah, and it's hard to hear this, but not everybody is your target audience. Like it's very likely that your friends aren't your target audience, your parents aren't your target audience.
Yeah.
It's somebody who you've not even thought of.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable too to have to really like plant your stake in the ground and say that you're not for someone. I think it makes people feel uncomfortable when you talk about it and you're kind of like, no, I don't sell to this person. They're like, okay, yeah, but you could. And I'm like, yeah, sure, but like that's not who I'm talking to, and it's not a good business model.
And there's a difference. I can sell honey to anyone and everyone, like in that regard, sure. Anybody could buy Honey Truck honey. Who am I to tell somebody, oh no, you're not my target audience, don't buy my honey? What that means is that it is navigating the choices that I make in the shelves that I decide I'm going to pursue to put Honey Truck on, because I'm not going to turn down a sale. If somebody comes to me and I already know like, I don't know that it's going to do well there, I can gently say like, hey, maybe you could consider bringing in these other brands alongside of mine if you're considering Honey Truck, because that would help sell the honey. But I make sales. I love accounts where it's reoccurring, right? Like it's one thing to get my honey on your shelf. It's another thing to get that jar of honey into somebody else's basket. And when that happens over and over and over again, that's a wholesale partner that I want, not somebody who's just needs honey and puts it out there and isn't really considering, will their client pay $12 for 9 ounces of honey? I'm not going to say no to somebody. I'm not going to not let them purchase honey, but I could also give them some tips or thoughts that they might not have considered if they're going to put Honey Truck on their shelves.
Yeah, because I think wholesale is such an interesting game to play. You have to think about it very differently from how you would direct to consumer. And it's about understanding the holistic experience around the shopping environment, not just like necessarily marketing to a single person. It's like, who is shops there, but you have to think about your product in relation to what else is around you.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I kind of came into it like, pardon my French, ass backwards, but I wasn't really considering, my wholesale pricing at the time. I just kind of threw a dart in the board and picked a number
Yeah.
that worked really well for me in the long run, because I said, okay, like, I'm not selling honey in a plastic jar. I'm selling it in glass, which is more expensive. I'm not having a plastic lid. I'm using a metal lid, which is more expensive. Those two renewable sources speak to a higher target audience, like a higher financial bracket of person who is considering, I want that in a product that I'm going to do. And then, like, just those changes over time stack up, and you don't really consider, when you're making a product, you want it to be affordable for the end consumer. You don't want to, price gouge people, but you also have to consider, if I'm going to wholesale this product, traditionally speaking, your wholesale accounts are going to want to purchase that jar for half of what your end cost is. So to keep numbers even, if I'm selling a jar of honey for $10, my wholesale client is going to expect to pay $5 for it. Can I produce that jar of honey for like $2.50 if I'm going to make a 50% markup on it? I don't know. Have you considered what goes into it? The jar, just specifically speaking about honey, but you could relate it to any product. Yeah. You sell lotions, you sell lip balms, you sell t-shirts, you sell tea. Like, have you considered the jar, the lid, the label, the safety seal, the product that's in it, your time that you spent putting it together? Do you have an employee that's helping you? Do you rent a space? Could you feasibly put, all of the costs of everything in there and then sell it to a wholesale partner and make money?
Yeah. So you're doing a lot of this math in the Excel spreadsheet, I imagine.
Yes, it's very important that you know your numbers very well, because if not, you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot when you scale and you realize that you're losing money on things.
Do you ever change your wholesale prices? So, like, if you go into a deal with somebody, is that like a 3-year contract, or how long is it? And then can you raise your rates at a later time, or does that not really happen?
So I don't currently have any contracts with people. I do negotiate pricing depending on how large of a scale it is. Obviously, if I sell one case to a store, that price is going to be different than somebody who buys 100 cases. Yeah. It just naturally is. And we expect that too as producers. If I'm going to buy, 200 jars to put my honey in, the moment that I start buying a pallet with 5,000 jars, I shouldn't be paying the same amount. And that directly translates to what I'm selling that jar of honey to my wholesalers, because they benefit from that as well.
Okay, that makes sense. I think this is all really great information, because I think it also shows kind of like what we talked about a little bit before, where you're really focusing this year on working on the business, not in the business. And it's these kinds of conversations that take you out of survival mode from just like, how do we keep it going so it doesn't stop? Mm-hmm. And also like the question of, if I take a day off, then that means that no work gets done, and that's not sustainable in the long run. And if you want to grow and scale, you have to get out of this like survival stage, and that requires you to work on the business. And so I'm curious, like, what made you finally realize that you had to make that shift?
Yeah, I will say that over time, that question specifically, did I create for myself a job, or did I create a business entity that I could sell someone? And before I asked that question a few years ago, I asked myself, do I have an expensive hobby, or do I have a business? Because an expensive hobby is something where, you're working really hard, you may be making some money, but like, it's kind of rudderless, like, what are you doing? Is it actually paying you? Because when I started Honey Truck, it was a side job. And so I was still doing photography and growing Honey Truck. And my husband at the time was growing his law firm practice. And so I was the one who was paying all of our bills. And slowly over time, he got his business off the ground. We still had no children. And, I looked at him one day and was like, hey, do you think that it's feasible that we can now live on the income that you're bringing in so that I can pursue Honey Truck and stop doing photography? And that's a really unique experience to both of us. But, like we said, yes, I jumped in and I started doing it. But the backstory is I wasn't paying myself. And that cuts both ways, because by not paying myself, what that meant was for every jar of honey that I sold, I could reproduce that jar and purchase a second one. So I had built in that scale over time. So I wasn't taking a loan out from a bank, but that meant that I wasn't paying myself because I'm paying myself in equity in my business. And so I'm proud to say that right now I'm debt free. I don't have a business owner that I have to share things with. But that was a hard question to ask myself. Do I have a business or do I have a hobby? At what point am I going to start paying myself? Yeah. And so obviously I did start paying myself and have grown it even more. And then just, a year ago, I was saying, okay, well, did I just create a stressful job, or again, do I have a business? And I think that over time you just learn more about things and you realize, okay, I'm going to go this way. And part of that is probably because I've taken 0 business classes. I didn't go to school for business. I didn't take any business 101, nothing. And so I'm kind of just learning as I go. And so I'm sure there's somebody who has a business degree out there that's like, this woman she could have benefited from that. But
I don't know. I got my master's in entrepreneurialism technically, and I still feel like a lot of this is me just like figuring it out, and like I don't even have all the answers at all. And I would argue that people who worked in corporate who then go to start their own business have the similar challenge where it's like, I also don't know what I'm doing, and you're just figuring things out as you go. But I'm really glad that you brought this up, because this is something I think about all the time. Like, how do you actually start paying yourself? Like, what does that look like? How do you actually start paying yourself? Is that just like you work harder and you just keep going until you can start paying yourself? Or is there like a business decision that you make where you like change your pricing or something that then allows you to have some margin for you?
I will say, I think I kind of plateaued a little bit in that I wasn't actively recruiting new wholesale accounts. And so I was steady with the income that was coming in. My costs were super low. And so I was able to kind of stockpile some cash to be able to say like, okay, I'm going to buy certain pieces of equipment so that I don't have to hire employees. I can have a machine that will help me run it far more efficiently. And then honestly, just taking the leap into it, like my business was profitable. Yeah. And, like over time, I personally use Shopify. I'm not paid in any way to say this, but I have taken Shopify loans over the course of time that have been like little buffers of money that if I need to buy another piece of equipment or something, I can. But like I said, in my pricing, I'd kind of built in that scale. Yeah. And it's just honestly betting on yourself, like I was like, I'm working hard. I have 2 part-time employees that I'm now paying. When am I getting a piece of the pie? What does this look like? And I think every business owner is fearful because you're like, oh my gosh, well, if I pay myself, what if I don't have enough money? It's
and
what comes first, chicken and
the
egg.
That in the business, or like there's other things that you feel like you need to do rather than to put it in your own bank account.
Right. And I think at this point in time, I've hit a level with Honey Truck where I have the equipment that I need to scale as efficiently as I'm going to for this next level. And I'm ready for growth, crawl, walk, run. And now I'm on the precipice of running. I've got my systems in place. I've got my operations down. I'm ready to support more wholesale accounts should they come to me, because I want sustainable growth. I don't want people to come to me and then not be able to have Honey Truck on their shelves. I want to be able to support them. And so that's important. And I think that I have built in that over time. And, it's just kind of just jumping in and saying, I'm going to do this thing. And it's so far worked out.
Yeah. And it's important, I think, to call attention to the fact that from the beginning, you knew that you wanted it to scale. You knew that you wanted it to be bigger than what it currently was. And you were incorporating that into the important aspects of the business from the day one. So I think that's important to call out, that like as somebody listening who wants to make sure that they're setting themselves up for success long term, that you build with that mindset of growth. And like, so any decision you make, you're asking, how does this support you in the long run for scale? I think that's important to call out. And now that you're switching up your mindset around that, I'm sure it's also still challenging to juggle life and business. And you have this amazing metaphor about juggling glass balls versus plastic balls. Can you enlighten the people on that metaphor and what that means?
Yeah. In life, you juggle a lot of things. And so those balls can either be glass or plastic, and every ball can change from plastic to glass, if I haven't even made it complicated for you. But when you and I were talking, the glass ball right now is you and me. We're doing this podcast. This has 100% of my attention. It is a glass ball. My children are plastic balls because they're both healthy. They're both at school. They're both cared for. They are safe. And they're not here with me. But if I get a phone call during this podcast that says, hey, your daughter is throwing up at school, suddenly you're the plastic ball and I have to go get my daughter because she's now a glass ball. And over time, you just get better at juggling things and realizing this thing that is really stressing me out and causing me a lot of issues, this is a plastic ball. I can let it go. It's not going to break if I don't catch it. It's fine. Yeah. And then you realize, oh, these people, these wholesale accounts or whatever, these are the glass balls because they have a proven track record of generating sales and revenue. And I'm going to bend over backwards to help them because they push my product. And I want to support accounts like that versus somebody who comes in and is like, oh, well, I'm not really sure what I want to do. And is this your best pricing? And like, to me, that's a plastic ball. And you just get better at identifying which tasks or, things that you're doing are glass or plastic.
Yeah. And what I also love about it too is it really highlights that A, none of this is as glamorous as I think a lot of people think it is. And B, that it's not a perfect system, that being a founder is not a perfect path and things are constantly changing and you have to learn to be adaptable to those changes. And recognizing the difference between the two, I think, is so important to build the resilience that you need. And like, that you can't focus on 100% of all the things at the same time. And that's a hard thing to accept, but you just become, I think, more ruthless about your priorities.
Yeah. And I try and consistently tell myself that I'm a limited being. I am not like, I don't really buy into hustle culture. Like for me, the word hustle, even if just my definition of the word hustle means that if you call me at 6:00, I'm going to answer the phone. There is no time that is off the table where I'm not going to address a business problem should it arise. I'm going to get up every morning and I'm just going to work as hard and as long as I possibly can and sacrifice everything on the altar of my business. Yeah. Or getting ahead or, promotions or whatever it is. And I don't subscribe to that. That is not what I would view as a definition of hustle. Like to me, hustle means work heartily at what you're doing and do it to the best of your ability, but also realize like I'm one person, I've got 2 kids and there are moments where they're both screaming and crying about certain things. And I have to quickly identify, is one of them hurt? That's the priority. Is one of them, if they're not hurt, then okay, what's happening and who's the priority and who gets addressed first. And when we're talking about hustle culture, like I get up and I work really hard, but I'm limited and I'm able to say, 5:00, I'm with my family. Like I'm mom. As soon as I walk out the door, hey, I would love to talk to you about Honey Truck. I'm going to be back in the office at 8:45 and I can give you a call then. But right now my family's my priority. And that doesn't mean that I don't work hard when I get into the office, it is my first priority while I'm here. But you get people who call you for different requests all the time. And it's like, okay, well, again, which is the glass and which is the plastic ball, and work at the one that's glass and work really hard at it and then address the plastic ball.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't really I don't subscribe to hustle culture either. I just don't think that it makes sense. Like, I think that there's a way to achieve your goals, but not at the expense of your health and your happiness. I think so much of being a founder comes from a place of passion and joy and excitement. And you don't ever want to get to a place where that's like twisted up with negative energy because like you're burnt out and exhausted. I just think that that never leads you to making good choices anyway. The best way that I think we grow and scale is through joy and happiness. And I feel like hustle culture is a direct opposition to that. And you can't have the joy and the passion required to continue to grow and to succeed if you're always just like not well mentally or physically.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I do enjoy working at Honey Truck, and I do enjoy being at home with my family. But I started Honey Truck because I wanted to be a part-time stay-at-home mom. Like I built my business in the margins of life when I first started. I had 3 years where we were, building Honey Truck, and I was trying to have kids and really couldn't. And then once we had children, we had 2 kids during COVID, and I was trying to answer work emails during nap times. I remember one day I was at home with my son, like covered in various bodily fluids, and it took me 3 hours to send one email. And I remember feeling so depleted and drained of like, how am I ever going to build a business when I can't even send more than one email in 3 hours? And, I think that no one really talks about just like that quiet resilience of just doing the next right thing. And even when it's hard, just you keep showing up, like to me, that's not hustle. What that is saying is like, it took me 3 hours because my son was my priority during that time. And I still answered the email. Was it as fast as I wanted it to be? No, I would have loved to have checked 10 other things off the list, but that's not, I am limited and I'm one person and I can only do one task at a time. And that's okay.
Yeah. The quiet resilience is what gets you through to the next phase though.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great space to potentially close, but I cannot let you go without knowing what your founder stack is. So I'm going to ask you 7 rapid fire questions about your journey thus far. Are you ready?
All right, let's go.
Okay. What tool do you live and die by?
What tool? Like computer tool? Right now, I would say it's my Google Calendar.
Yes, that's a good answer. What is the best money you've spent on your business under $5,000?
Okay, actually, it's really close to $5,000. I would say my accumulation table in my production space because it allows our production line to be run by one person as opposed to 2 people.
Oh, that's so cool. That's amazing.
The jars accumulate on the table, and then one person can pause everything and continue on the next phase of stuff. Yeah.
And I'm sure that saves you a ton.
It does. Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is one book or resource that influenced your entrepreneurial experience?
Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Ooh, okay, I'm going to look that up afterwards. I haven't heard of that. What is one belief or assumption you had when you started that has completely reversed?
Man, I don't know. That's a difficult one. That's not a quick questioning.
It's a tough one. I know.
I would say, honestly, the one that pops into my mind, only because I've been a part-time stay-at-home mom, 95% of my journey so far, would be that crying kids in the grocery store are not a product of poor parenting. Meaning, like, the Lord has humbled me so much where my kids are just like chaotic and screaming. And I remember being so judgmental. And now I'm like, oh man, I'm eating so much crow right now and I feel so bad when I see moms who have kids who are having meltdowns. I just want to walk over and be like, you got this, you can do it. It's going to be fine. You can just push through. You're doing great. Stay strong.
After spending a lot of time with my niece and nephew, like I know, we don't judge parents. If your kid is at the dinner table, out at a restaurant watching TV, it's because those poor parents need 10 minutes to be adults,
Yeah. I will say that my perspective on children has 100% changed.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Okay, next one. No matter how crazy your day gets, what is the one thing that you look forward to that you aren't willing to sacrifice?
I love interacting with my wholesale partners, my beekeepers that I work with. I really love public education. I love talking about honey. I love all of that stuff. I'm very passionate about honeybees and the ethical treatment of honeybees. I will never offload my relationships to somebody else. That will always be a part of my business that I'm investing in and managing.
That sounds so fun. Okay, next one. What is one brand in or outside of your industry that is inspiring you right now?
I would say Pistachio. They are a couple food founder, and it's like a pistachio spread, and they're really innovative with their social media, with their wholesale accounts. Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to look them up too. I haven't heard of that. Okay, last question. What is a song or album that you have on repeat right now?
I would say that would be, I'm chuckling because it's typically some kid soundtrack because I don't get to choose my music anymore. So when the Apple Music year in review comes around, it's typically whatever movie was going on at the time for my children. So that would be Zootopia 2 right now. I listen to a lot of that soundtrack. Gabby's Dollhouse.
Really yes. Yeah. My niece is obsessed with the Gabby's Dollhouse. Also, the Zootopia soundtrack was kind of fire. I really enjoyed it myself.
It's good. My kids also really love Sing 2. That's a good one.
Okay, I haven't seen that one. Do they like K-pop Demon Hunters?
They have not seen that yet.
Okay. That's a great album. Highly recommend.
Yeah. Okay.
Danielle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Maddie. I really appreciate being here.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can find all the links to connect with Danielle in the show notes. If you feel called to support this podcast, please leave a review. That is always the most impactful way to help. And if you're looking for more, I would be deeply honored if you wanted to buy my matcha this week. The link is below. And if you enjoyed this episode and you're looking for more before the next one, feel free to dive into the well on Substack, where you'll find more founder wisdom and essays on entrepreneurship. See you guys next week.